The internet had been getting more dangerous for decades. Not dramatically, not with the sudden cinematic violence of a bomb going off. It happened the way most serious things happen, slowly, incrementally in the background of ordinary life, while the world focused on other things. Every year, security researchers published their reports. Every year, the numbers climbed. More vulnerabilities discovered, more breaches, more data stolen from more places. The organizations responsible for protecting critical systems hired more people, bought more tools, ran more scans, and still somehow fell further behind. The problem was scale. The problem had always been scale. Software was everywhere. It ran hospitals and power grids and banking systems and the code in your car and the firmware in the camera watching your front door. And somewhere inside all of that software, buried in code bases that no single human being could read in a lifetime, lurking in dependencies so old their original authors had been retired for years, there were flaws, weaknesses, small fractures in the architecture of the digital world, invisible to the human eye, waiting with the patience of geological time to be found and used. Most of them were never found. Most of them would never be found. Until April 2026, when everything changed. On April 7, 2026, Anthropic, the AI safety company founded by former members of OpenAI, with a stated mission of building AI that was safe and beneficial for humanity, made an announcement that did not receive the attention it deserved for approximately 48 hours. The announcement described a new AI model. Not a new version of Claude, exactly. Not Claude 5 or Claude Opus 5 or any name on the expected roadmap. Something different, something that sat above the existing tiers in a category of its own, designed for a specific class of problem that previous models had approached but never quite solved. They called it Claude Mythos. The name had a deliberate weight to it. Mythos, from the Greek meaning story, or the body of stories that defines a civilization's understanding of the world. The engineers who built it described it, in technical briefings, as a new class of intelligence built for ambitious projects, cybersecurity, autonomous coding, long-running agents. In plain language, a machine that could look at software the way no human or previous AI ever had, not line by line, not module by module, but all at once, the entire structure simultaneously, the way a god might look at a city from above and see not just the streets, but every crack in every wall. They also announced that they were not releasing it publicly. This second part of the announcement was unusual enough to make people pay attention. What Mythos could do. To understand why the announcement mattered, you had to understand what made Mythos different from the AI models that had come before it. Previous AI models were good at many things. They could write code. They could explain complex concepts. They could find certain kinds of bugs in certain kinds of code when pointed at the right place and given the right instructions. Security researchers had been using them for a year or two with real, measurable results. But they had limits, fundamental architectural limits that meant their analysis was always partial, always bounded by how much they could hold in their attention at once. Mythos had no such limit. Its context window, the amount of information it could process simultaneously, was for practical purposes infinite. It could ingest an entire code base, not a function, not a file, not even a module. The whole thing. Millions of lines of code, all the dependencies, all the interactions, held in its attention at once like a single sentence. It could see the structure of a software system the way an architect sees a blueprint, not as isolated elements, but as a living, interconnected whole. And then it could reason about that whole, not by pattern matching against known vulnerabilities, the approach that every previous tool had used, but by understanding intent, by asking, what is this code trying to do, and where does what it is doing diverge from what it was meant to do? Where is the gap? Where is the crack? The results of its first major test run were extraordinary. Anthropic's researchers, working in controlled conditions, turned Mythos loose on the code bases of every major operating system and every major web browser. The list was essentially the foundation of the modern internet. Windows, macOS, Linux, Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Edge. Code that had been reviewed by some of the best security engineers in the world, millions of times, for decades. Mythos found thousands of vulnerabilities that none of those reviews had caught. Not minor issues. 0 days. Vulnerabilities unknown even to the software's own developers, exploitable by anyone with the knowledge and access to use them. In one case, that would later become the most cited example in dozens of industry reports, Mythos found a flaw in OpenBSD, an operating system specifically designed and celebrated for its security hardening that had been sitting undetected for 27 years. 27 years. A vulnerability old enough to vote. The architecture of the storm. The cybersecurity world processes bad news quickly. It has to. By the morning of April 9th, 2 days after the announcement, the conversations that matter were already happening at speed. The question everyone was asking was not what did Mythos find? The question everyone was really asking was simpler and more frightening. What does it mean that this is now possible? Because Mythos was not magic. It was engineering. And engineering, unlike magic, could be replicated. Anthropic's own internal assessment was that comparable capabilities would be developed by other labs within 6 to 18 months. OpenAI was reportedly already working on a similar system. Other actors, less transparent and less constrained, were presumably doing the same. The window between restricted access and widespread availability was narrow. Perhaps a year, perhaps less. This was the shape of the storm. Not a single catastrophic event, but a permanent change in the weather. The first response. On April 12th, 5 days after the announcement, a document was published. The AI Vulnerability Storm, Building a Mythos-Ready Security Program. It had more than 60 contributors and over 250 CISOs involved in review, created in just 3 days. The message was clear. The vulnerability storm was not a future threat. It was an arriving one. The old model of security, slow, reactive, manageable, no longer applied. The new model, an AI can find everything, chain minor weaknesses into devastating attack paths, scan entire infrastructures faster than human teams can map them, build exploits in hours instead of weeks, and it can do this at scale. The distinction between low and critical vulnerabilities begins to collapse. The human side of the storm. Behind the reports and frameworks, there was a human story. A security engineer reads the Mythos briefings. 11 years in the field, experienced, calm, methodical. She reviews her organization's systems, and then one thought cuts through everything. How many hidden vulnerabilities are sitting here right now? She cannot know. That is the fear, not immediate chaos, but the gap between what defenders can see and what attackers soon will. The dual-use dilemma. Mythos was not purely a threat. It was also the most powerful defensive tool ever created. The same intelligence that could exploit vulnerabilities could also eliminate them. Anthropic launched Project Glasswing, giving controlled access to major tech companies and security organizations to find and fix weaknesses first. It was not a guarantee, it was a race. The storm arrives. By late April 2026, the storm had arrived. Not as catastrophe, but as a new reality. Hundreds of new vulnerabilities flowed into public databases. Not a crisis, but a signal. A preview of what the future would look like when such capabilities were widespread. Banks began testing their systems. Governments updated cybersecurity frameworks. Security teams shifted from awareness to action. Monday morning had arrived. The shape of what comes next. The vulnerability storm is not over. It is still arriving. What has changed is fundamental. The assumption that most vulnerabilities remain hidden is no longer valid. AI does not prioritize. It finds everything. Security must become continuous, real-time, adaptive, but there is balance. Defenders now have the same tools. The question is simple. Who moves faster? Anthropic's bet is that defenders can win if they act early, decisively, and responsibly. History has not yet decided. What we know is this. On April 7, 2026, a threshold was crossed. And intelligence saw the digital world completely. And now the race has begun. The storm is here. The question is what we build inside it.